Travis, welcome back to our next segment of Questioning Faith. Our first couple of videos were really, really popular on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really cool.
It really was. So just in case people are tuning in today, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Travis Lowe. I'm the teaching pastor at Bay Life Church, which means that in addition to preaching on Sundays, I'm also the one that sort of manages our resources from podcasts to blogs to this YouTube series that we're doing now. So,
And more.
Yeah, and
you
more.
even teach on Sundays.
I do, yeah.
I mean, that's awesome.
I'm all over the place.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, I'm the communications director for Bay Life, and we started getting questions in from people who didn't exactly have a good avenue to be able to ask their questions. We put a question box on resources, so our resources page, baylife.org/resources, where they can just fill out a quick form, or they can send an email to questions@baylife.org, and basically just ask whatever they want, and we will do our best to answer the biblical questions as completely and as thoroughly as possible in the time that we have.
Yeah, and we've gotten a ton of questions in since we dropped the last 4 videos, and so I'm excited to jump into them.
Let's jump right into them.
Yeah,
Let's go ahead and ask this first question. How does the Bible apply to modern society? Good question. Hard question.
That is a great question, right? Yeah. And the force of this question comes from the fact that the earliest parts of the Bible, like the book of Job and the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis through Numbers and Deuteronomy, are almost 4,000 years old.
$4,000.
Yeah, 4,000 years old.
That's a lot of years.
Right?
That's more years than me.
I mean, definitely more than me, because you're way older than I am.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
you're totally welcome.
Rubbing that one in. Excellent.
And so, yeah, I can feel the force of this question. How does something that is at its oldest 4,000 years old, how does it speak to 2020? I think we've got to acknowledge up front that there have been times where Christians have gotten the Bible wrong. They've misunderstood Scripture. And in so doing, they've done damage to culture and to society by misapplying the Bible.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
I think you've got to be able to say that. At the same time, you also have to be able to acknowledge, which I think we're going to get to, is how the Bible has spoken into society and has spoken into culture and has helped shape human rights, has helped shape our understanding of science. Is that?
Yeah, and that's what I would say. So the one caveat is that sometimes Christians have gotten things wrong, and yet there's the 2 things you mentioned actually really stand out to me as places where the Bible has formed and shaped and given rise to things that we take for granted in our modern culture.
How so?
So let's start with science, for example.
Great, I love science.
Generally speaking, people think of religion and science, especially Christianity and science, as being opposed to one another.
Right, I think that's a false assumption.
Exactly, yeah.
But I do think at times science does pit itself rather directly against Christianity and vice versa.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we can think of something like the trial of Galileo as being one of the historic and sort of classic examples of Christianity versus science. And I think there's more complexity there, but rather than looking at the way that Christianity and science have gone back and forth, I think it's important to recognize that Christianity has provided in many ways the foundation for what we accept as the scientific method.
Wow.
In a lot of ways, Christianity is the garden from which the scientific method has grown. And there's a lot of historians and a lot of historians of science in particular that are starting to acknowledge this. So maybe just 2 areas that Christianity is essentially the foundation of what we think of as science. One is that Christianity asserts what we would call monotheism. It's this idea that there is only one God.
Indeed.
That's clear from the beginning of the Bible, Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's a radical statement in the culture in which Genesis is written.
Absolutely, because back then, they believed that God was a multifaceted, they didn't believe in one God, they believed in every God.
They're polytheistic.
Right, so the God of the water, God of the air, God of the ground, God of the rocks, God of the moon, right?
Right, so they're polytheistic, and more than that, each of these gods, when you look at sort of the classic myths of other religions, things like the Greek gods or the Egyptian gods, they are wildly unpredictable. And more than that, they're incredibly immoral to the point that you wouldn't actually want to be friends with them.
Absolutely, like they weren't knowable because they were fearsome. I mean, they were and precocious.
Right.
Like on any given moment, they could destroy you, your family, your crops, and everybody that you know.
And this is the framework that ancient people were living in, is that there's a God for everything, and that these gods are unpredictable.
Okay.
And they could change their mind at any given moment. there is no foundation for studying the world if at any given moment one of the gods could change their mind and act differently.
Okay.
In order to study the world in the way that we do scientifically, you need a world that is orderly. And that's what Christianity proposes, that the world is not the result of a multitude of gods who could change their mind at any moment, but it is the result of one God who is consistent and does not change. And because of that,
I can see how that could give birth to an entire thought process.
Right. That is the foundation of science. The world is orderly. And the reason why people believe that the world is orderly is because it is the product of a single mind, and that's the mind of the one God whose personality does not shift and change. So that gives birth to, it really enables us to even attempt to study the world, because we can go, okay, it'll be the same tomorrow as it was yesterday.
Well, I mean, even the scriptures teach us about God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah.
So with that in mind,
the Bible
science
is the foundation
shouldn't change
there,
because if God is the creator of things that are orderly, then creation should make sense.
Right, exactly.
On some level.
Yeah, so in that regard, Christianity provides the foundation for that. The other thing I would say, and this is actually really interesting, there's a scholar named Peter Harrison. I don't know if he's a Christian or not. He taught at Oxford for a while, and he's a professor of religion and science. That's what he studies, is the relationship. And he published a book several years ago talking about the way that the scientific method itself comes from Christian theology. So, like, you learned this in middle school, right? It's you produce a hypothesis, you set up an experiment, you look at the data, and then you repeat.
You have to observe and repeat. Observe and repeat.
Observe and repeat. And you're never the only set of eyes looking at it.
That's true. That's true.
You always bring in people to critique. That's what the peer review process is. Right. Hey, these are the results that I've observed, but now I need other people to look at it and make sure that I haven't missed something.
Okay.
And you learned that in like middle school, right?
Right,
That's
absolutely.
That's basic science 101.
It definitely goes further, but they revisit that throughout high school. I mean, I think of I've got my youngest is a high school student, and he's currently going through environmental science, and they are revisiting this over and over and over again. So that's kind of been fresh in my mind.
Absolutely.
As you're talking about this, as I'm thinking about my son. So
So the thing that Peter Harrison notes is he looks at some of the early Western scientists, people like Francis Bacon.
Okay.
And these are the people who helped develop that method.
Okay.
And the reason why they developed that method is because they believed in the Christian doctrine of original sin. They believed what Genesis 2 and 3 says about human beings being corrupted by sin.
Okay.
And what theologians talk about is something that they call the Noetic Effects of sin. It's not just that sin produces death, but sin corrupts our ability to know things. And so our senses aren't as trustworthy as they should be because they've been affected by sin. And so the early scientists took what the Bible said seriously. So my ability to know things can't be trusted, which means I need to repeat my experiments. I need other people to confirm things. I need outside perspective to make up for the fact that I'm a fallen human being.
Wow.
So that whole part of the scientific method runs straight back to what the Bible says about human beings. That's where it comes from. So we ask the question, how does Christianity provide the foundations for science? One, by saying the world is orderly and can be understood. Two, by saying people are sinful and you shouldn't trust your senses.
That's some incredible insight. I mean, and I think we intrinsically know that is we're to assume that you're going to be able to just watch something by yourself and write your complete evaluation without having anybody confirm your data. I think it's folly.
Right, absolutely. And the early scientists understood that, and they understood that because the Bible gave them a foundation for that by saying human beings are sinful.
Interesting.
And the human heart is deceitful. I think of the other...
So the scientific method was relevant then, but the scientific method is still in play today. So
absolutely.
I guess it's easy to say that the Bible definitely still speaks to that.
Right, exactly. Right. I think the other area that comes to mind, and it's something you mentioned earlier, is in the area of human rights. There's a British historian who is not a Christian. His name's Tom Holland. Not to be confused with Spider-Man.
Okay, all right. I'm a big Marvel fan.
Right, so. Yeah. Both of them are from the UK, but Tom Holland is a British historian, not a Christian.
Okay.
And he's recently published this book called Dominion that has been getting a lot of positive press. And what he essentially did is he traced our modern ideas about equality and human rights and human dignity, and he sees it running all the way back to Christianity. Okay. He sees Christianity as being the foundation of what we think of as human rights. In particular, it's the crucifixion of Jesus that gives us our idea of human rights.
Okay. Expound.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that seems a little bit strange
Because it was like a massive violation of human rights to hang a man on a cross.
Right.
Okay.
So it helps to know how crucifixion was viewed in Roman society.
Okay.
It was not just a form of punishment. It was a form of humiliation. And it was a form of punishment that was reserved for slaves and the worst of criminals.
So people who were not seen as
Human beings.
Human beings. They
Right.
were beneath us, I guess, is what you would...
Right. And the goal was not just to inflict pain, although crucifixion was painful. But the goal of crucifixion was to say to everyone watching, this person on the cross is not a human being. This thing hanging on the cross is subhuman. Fleming Rutledge is an Episcopal priest, and she has this book called The Crucifixion, and she says the goal of crucifixion was to eliminate its victims as being candidates for participation in the human race. Which is so intense.
Wow,
right?
that's ridiculous. That's
Right.
crazy intense.
The goal is to say this person is less than human.
Okay.
But think about this. Christians looked at Jesus of Nazareth,
Mm-hmm.
this crucified man, and said, this is God.
But this is God made flesh.
This human being is also the creator of the world. This individual hanging on this cross that Rome is saying is subhuman
Right.
is actually the creator of all of humanity.
Holy.
And that broke the paradigm in the ancient world.
Yeah.
To be able to say that this person who is being treated as subhuman is actually the author of all life caused the early church to look at people who had been viewed as less than human. People who were slaves, children who were not esteemed in Roman society, women who were excluded from so many things. It caused the early church to go, if this person hanging on a cross is truly God, then what does that say about the value of all these people we've seen as unvaluable?
So up until that point, people were property, or people were just marginalized, or marginalized people. I mean, so you've got people who Jesus, well, even through his ministry and his life, I mean, he continually went out to the marginalized anyway.
Right.
And so he valued them. Then he was devalued, and yet we place
Value on him.
pinnacle value on Jesus,
Right.
and his existence, his life, his ministry.
And that broke the paradigm
Right.
in the ancient world.
I mean,
so
I would
much
think
so
it
that
shattered it.
break is not strong enough a word.
Right.
It shattered the paradigm. So much so that the earliest example we have of somebody arguing against slavery, arguing that slavery was evil, is a Christian bishop named Irenaeus.
Okay.
And he roots his argument against slavery in two things. One, what Genesis says, that human beings are made in the image of God. And two, the fact that God became a human being, which means that human beings have dignity and value and worth. And so when we come back to this question, how does the Bible speak to modern society? I would say this: the Bible is the foundation of so many good things we take for granted in modern society. It is the foundation of how and why we do science. It's the foundation of how and why we view people of all backgrounds as having intrinsic dignity. That comes and arises out of Scripture. And so it has everything to say to the modern world, because it's the foundation of so many good things that our world celebrates.
Absolutely. And I just as a side point, I think the Bible creates this understanding of reality, but at the same time, it offers profound hope. And I think in our world today, we're not looking for petty hope, because petty hope is just well wishes. And well wishes, sending prayers and thoughts, that doesn't change anything. And yet when I found that people who dig into Scripture, who've lost hope, they find it within the Word. So not just from a scientific perspective, not just from a human rights perspective, but for me,
From a personal
perspective, I think people find such amazing richness in the context of Scripture and in the life and work of Jesus. I think it's undeniable.
Yeah. Amen.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for coming. We'll keep on these same outfits and record our next question in just a second.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.